I was soaked to the bone, hands locked around the steering wheel of a Navy supply truck as the storm swallowed the Virginia highway whole. Rain turned the road into a black river. And my wipers fought a losing battle, slapping back and forth. Like they were trying to outrun the night. It was close to midnight, the final stretch of a 16-hour resupply run back to Norfolk Base. My name is Lieutenant Emily Hayes. U.S. Navy Logistics Division. That night, I thought exhaustion was the only enemy left. I was wrong. Lightning split the sky over the marshland, briefly turning the world white. The road gleamed like oil. Somewhere between Franklin and Suffolk, two weak hazard lights flickered. Ahead, barely visible through the wall of rain. At first, I thought it was debris. Then the shape came into focus, a dark SUV, hood up, taillights fading like it was giving up. The Navy manual in my glove compartment was clear, no unauthorized stops. No civilian interaction during classified transport, but my conscience was louder. As I slowed, a man stumbled out into the rain, waving both arms through fogged glass. I saw a woman and a small child pressed together in the back seat. My stomach tightened. Civilians, middle of nowhere, category to storm. Keep going, I told myself. Base is 30 miles away. Call it in once you're safe. But my foot never touched the gas. I pulled onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. Into the storm, I could already hear my commanding officer's voice in my head. Protocol violations, risk assessments, consequences. I grabbed my poncho and stepped into the downpour. The man shouted over the wind, engine dead, no signal. I nodded and waved him back. Stay with your family. Sir, I'll check it. Kneeling in the mud, flashlight cutting through, steam rising from the engine. The smell told me everything before my eyes did. Burnt wiring, coolant. This car wasn't going anywhere. I walked back to the window. You're not getting out tonight, I said. Nearest service is closed. Next town's 20 miles. His face collapsed. We'll freeze out here. Not if I can help it. I dragged heavy-duty chains from my toolbox, standard Navy issue. He tried to protest, but I stopped him with a tired half-smile. Sir, consider this a logistics exercise. The storm screamed while I hooked the SUV to the truck. My uniform clung to my skin. Water filled my boots. When everything was secure, I climbed back into the cab and checked the mirror. Their headlights glowed faintly behind me. All right, I muttered, shifting into gear. Let's get you home. We crawled through the storm, the wipers thumping in time with the rain every so often. His voice crackled over the CB radio. You still there, Lieutenant? Still here, I answered. Hang tight. 40 minutes later, a small roadside motel appeared through the mist like a miracle. I pulled in, unhooked the chains, and checked the SUV one last time. The man stepped out, drenched, eyes bright. I don't have much cash, he said, fumbling with his wallet. At least let me pay for fuel. I shook my head. Get your family warm. That's enough. He studied me like he was trying to memorize my face. What's your name? Lieutenant Emily Hayes. He nodded slowly. You've done more than you know. Lightning flashed again as I drove away, his silhouette frozen beside the motel sign. He raised a hand, I returned it and disappeared. Back into the storm. Dawn found me at the base gate, fog clinging to the asphalt. The sentry saluted. Rough night, Mum, you could say that, I muttered, inside the logistics hangar. My report was taken without comment. My uniform was still soaked. All I wanted was sleep. Instead, a note waited on my desk. Report to Captain Briggs. 700. Trouble. The next morning came too fast. My cuffs were still damp as I stood outside his office, replaying every second of the storm. The door clicked open. Lieutenant Hayes. I stepped inside and saluted. Captain Briggs didn't look up. His desk was perfect, his ribbons aligned like they'd been measured with a ruler. He slid a paper across the desk. Do you know what this is? A formal reprimand. Disobedience of Standing Order 7A. Yes, sir, you jeopardized classified cargo, he said. Sentiment does not override protocol, with respect. Sir, I said carefully, there was a family, a child. He slammed his pen down. A child does not override Navy protocol. Silence filled the room. You're reassigned to base operations, he continued. Effective immediately. Desk duty, paperwork, walls, yes, sir, as I left. Lieutenant Miller smirked. From the doorway, next time, he said softly, try saving the world on your own time. The days blurred together, fluorescent lights, inventory logs, the hum of computers. Every evening, I ran the perimeter just to breathe. And every night, I saw that child's face through the rain. I wasn't proud. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just couldn't drive past. A week later, Captain Briggs held up my reprimand. In a briefing, this is what happens when protocol is ignored. I stayed silent. Afterward, Chief Morales found me by the hangar, hands still oily. I stopped a convoy once, he said. Saved a kid. Got written up. What happened? I asked. He smiled. Nothing good. Would do it again. Sometimes the uniform forgets it's worn by people. 2 weeks passed. Desk duty became routine, and then, one afternoon, an envelope appeared on my desk. No return address, just my name. Inside was a handwritten note. That night saved our lives. My daughter still talks about the Navy truck that pulled her out of the storm. Thank you. Tucked inside was a child's crayon drawing. A big truck, stick figures, rain, and a bright yellow sun breaking through the clouds. I stared at it for a long time. The Navy teaches you to follow orders. But that storm taught me something else. Some rules keep systems running. Others remind you why they exist in the first place. The work became routine, mind-numbing, predictable, safe. My reports were flawless, my posture, my tone, my conduct spotless. But the silence in that office pressed down on me heavier than any storm ever had. One evening, I wandered down to the pier instead of going straight back to quarters. The sun was sinking low, setting the water on fire. Streaks of orange and red stretching across the bay. Navy ships rested at anchor, massive steel silhouettes against the fading light, quiet. Still, permanent. I wondered about the family from that night, if they made it home, if the child remembered anything at all. Maybe they'd already forgotten me. Maybe that was how it was supposed to be. I turned to leave. Lieutenant Hayes. A young ensign jogged up, breathless, clipboard tucked under his arm. Captain Briggs requests your presence immediately. My pulse kicked hard against my ribs. Another reprimand. Another warning. Maybe worse. I followed him back through the corridor. My boots echoing sharply against the tile. Each step felt louder than the last. When we reached Briggs's office, the air inside felt different, tight, uncertain. Two chairs faced his desk. One of them was already occupied. The man standing as I entered had grey hair, calm eyes, and a presence that seemed to steady the room just by existing. His uniform caught the light for silver stars. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Lieutenant Hayes, Briggs said stiffly, clearing his throat, allow me to introduce Admiral Warren, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations. The Admiral stepped forward and extended his hand. His eyes held a quiet, knowing glimmer. Good morning, Lieutenant, he said evenly. I believe we've met before. The storm came rushing back all at once. Rain, chains, hazard lights, a stranded car on a dark highway. The man who'd asked my name, Captain Briggs, blinked, unaware of the tension tightening the room. Admiral Warren is here to review our logistics program. But the Admiral wasn't looking at Briggs. His gaze stayed on me, steady, familiar. I snapped to attention, heart pounding. Sir, he returned the salute. Let's talk about protocol, shall we? I didn't sleep much after that meeting. His eyes stayed with me long after I left the office, unreadable, calm, and strangely kind. The base buzzed with rumors about his unannounced inspection, but no one knew the details. Briggs strutted through the halls like a man chasing a promotion, barking orders. Polishing an already perfect desk, I kept my head down. Paperwork, spreadsheets, endless requisition forms, anything to keep my mind busy. But every time thunder rolled across the bay, I was back on Route 58, chains clanking, rain pounding, his voice crackling through the radio. "You've done more than you know." 3 days later, orders came down to prepare a presentation for the Admiral. I spent the afternoon organizing fuel routes and efficiency reports in the operations room. Lieutenant Miller leaned against a file. Cabinet nearby, smirking. "Still here. Hayes, thought you'd be discharged by now." I didn't look up. He grinned wider. "Guess crying in a storm doesn't earn medals." I kept typing, steady and calm. "Some medals don't need metal." He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Before I could answer, Chief Florham stepped in. "Everyone in dress uniforms tomorrow. Admirals visiting the operations center at 0900. Miller straightened instantly. I just nodded. That night, I walked down to the docks again. The sky was clear for once, stars scattered across still water. The base was quiet, broken only by the low hum of generators. I leaned against the railing and breathed in the salt air. I thought about my father, Navy chief, retired. He used to say real service wasn't about applause, it was about conscience. If you follow every rule without thinking, he'd told me, you're just a uniform. But when you follow what's right, you're a sailor. I'd broken a rule, but maybe I'd stayed a sailor. Morning came sharp and bright. The base buzzed with nervous energy, flags raised, boots polished, brass gleaming. Admiral Warren's convoy arrived at exactly 0900. From my office window, I watched him step out of the black sedan, flanked by aides. No theatrics, no arrogance. Just authority that didn't need to announce itself. Captain Briggs met him at the gate, practically saluting before the door closed. Their voices drifted faintly across the courtyard. "We're honored. Admiral, I've prepared full reports on supply efficiency." "Good," Warren replied calmly. "But I'm more interested in your people. Numbers tell stories. People tell the truth." By mid-morning, whispers spread. The Admiral was reviewing case files, personnel evaluations, disciplinary records. My name floated through the air more than once. At noon, Chief Morale stopped by my desk. "You look like you're waiting on a storm, Lieutenant." "Feels like one." He nodded toward the window. "Storms have a way of washing things clean." At 1400 hours, the message came through internal comms. "Lieutenant Hayes. Report to Command Briefing Room 1. My heart spiked. I smoothed my uniform and walked inside. The tension was thick. Briggs stood at the head of the long table. Senior officers lined beside him. Admiral Warren sat at the far end, reading from a folder. "My folder." "Lieutenant Hayes," Briggs announced. "We're reviewing procedural discipline." The Admiral requested a field deviation case. I stood at attention. "Yes, sir." Warren looked up. "This report says you disobeyed standing orders during an active supply transport. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir. I stopped to assist civilians stranded in a storm." Briggs cut in quickly. The infraction was clear. She jeopardized cargo integrity and violated command authority. The Admiral closed the folder slowly. "Was any cargo lost?" "No, sir." "Any injuries?" "No, sir." "Was the mission completed?" "Yes, sir." He paused. "Then the only failure here is moral judgment." The room went still. "Yours or hers?" He added quietly. "I'm still deciding." Briggs stiffened. "Sir." Warren stood. The room seemed to shift with him. "When I was a junior officer," he said, "my CO taught me something I never forgot. Leadership isn't measured by blind obedience. It's measured by judgment when orders fall short." He turned to me. You made a hard call. Yes, sir, I said. I'd make it again. He nodded once. That's what I thought. He left without another word. Outside, sunlight spilled across the courtyard, warm against white concrete. The air smelled of jet fuel and salt, for the first time in weeks. I felt calm. Honor doesn't announce itself. It waits for the truth to catch up. The next morning, an urgent email waited for me. Report to Admiral's quarters, 1000. My stomach tightened as I buttoned my uniform. Outside, seagulls cried over the harbour. The air was heavy quiet before something unseen. The Admiral's quarters sat high in the administration wing. I straightened my collar and knocked. Enter. The room was lined with maps, flags, photographs of ships and missions past. Admiral Warren stood by the window, sunlight catching the silver in his hair. Lieutenant Hayes, he said calmly, "Thank you for coming." I saluted. He gestured to a chair. "At ease, have a seat." I hesitated, then sat, unsure if this was a conversation or a reckoning. He studied me in silence. "Permission to join you." I turned. Admiral Warren stood there in his dress blues, hands clasped behind his back, the wind tugging gently at the edge of his coat. "Yes, sir," I said. Stepping aside, he leaned against the sea wall beside me, looking out over the water. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The ships moved slowly in the distance, steady and deliberate, like they always had. "You handled today well," he said at last. "Better than most officers twice your rank." "Thank you, sir." He nodded once. "My daughter asked about you this morning." I felt my chest tighten. "Is she?" "She's fine," he said quickly, a faint smile touching his face. "Still shaken, still stubborn. She wanted me to tell you something." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded note. She wrote it herself. I took it carefully, as if it might disappear if I moved too fast. Inside, the handwriting was uneven. Childlike, "Thank you for helping my mommy and me. Grandpa says you're brave. I think you're nice." I swallowed hard. "Tell her," I said quietly, "that she was very brave too." "I will," he replied. The wind picked up, snapping the flag above headquarters. Warren watched it for a long moment. "You know," he said, "there will be people who resent this. Promotions earned this way, policies changed because of one decision." "I know, sir." "Good." He looked at me then, really looked at me, because leadership isn't about being liked, it's about being trusted. You've earned that, protect it. I will. He pushed off the wall and straightened. "Tomorrow won't be easy. Reform never is, but you won't be alone." He paused, then added more softly, "Neither will my family ever forget what you did." I saluted. He returned it, crisp and precise. When he walked away, the night felt different, not lighter. Exactly, but clearer, like air after rain. I stayed by the seawall a while longer, watching the lights ripple across the water. 12 years ago, I joined the Navy believing service meant sacrifice. Somewhere along the way, I'd learned it also meant choice. The next weeks were hard. Policies rewritten, training adjusted, conversations that made people uncomfortable. But something shifted. Officers spoke up more. Junior sailors stopped flinching when they made judgment calls. Fear loosened its grip. The storm on Route 58 faded into memory, but its lesson stayed. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything until it gives you back more than you ever expected. I didn't save my career that night. I found it, and every time I hear thunder roll across the bay, I remember, honor doesn't live in rules alone. It lives in the courage to act when they fall short. "Of course, sir." He stepped up beside me at the railing, the evening breeze moving softly between us. The water below shifted with the tide, calm now as if it had never known violence. "Beautiful night," he said. "Yes, sir." We stood. there without rushing the silence, the kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. Then, gently, he spoke again. My daughter told me about the moment you stopped. She said you looked calm, even when everything around you was chaos. I let out a small breath, almost a laugh. Truth is, sir, I was terrified. But the job teaches you how to move forward, even when fear is loud. He nodded slowly. That's the difference between courage and bravado. One makes noise, the other simply does what must be done. He turned toward me fully then. His expression steady, sincere. You reminded an old officer why we wear this uniform, Commander Hayes. Thank you, sir. I'll be leaving Norfolk soon, he said, but before I do, I want to leave something behind. A standing directive, we're calling it the Samaritan Rule. I felt my chest tighten. Any officer who stops to render aid, even if it means bending orders, will not be punished if lives are saved. That's a good rule, I said quietly. He smiled. It's your rule. You inspired it. He held out his hand. I took it, firm and wordless. The way sailors do when respect says more than language ever could, as he walked away. His silhouette dissolved into the setting sun. The storm that started everything was gone, but its echo stayed with me, a reminder that doing what's right can cost you everything before it gives you back more than you ever imagined. I stayed there as the light softened to gold. Evening. Colors sounded over the loudspeaker. I raised my hand in a quiet salute. For once, the wind felt like forgiveness. The ceremony that followed wasn't grand. No band, no cameras. Just a handful of sailors in a hangar that smelled of salt and jet fuel. Still, my hands trembled as I stood before Admiral Warren. Sunlight streamed through the open doors. Glinting off water and steel, he opened a small velvet box. Inside rested a single silver oak leaf. Lieutenant Emily Hayes, he said, voice warm and steady. Your record has been amended to reflect commendation for judgment under crisis conditions. Effective immediately, you are promoted to the rank of commander. The words landed slowly. He pinned the insignia himself. Some lessons require a storm to be remembered, he said softly. You taught one to the entire chain of command. Applause followed, restrained but heartfelt. Chief Morales clapped harder than anyone. Later, sailors came to shake my hand, some old friends, some former skeptics. When Miller finally stepped forward, he was quieter than I'd ever seen him. You earned it, he said. Thank you. I didn't understand back then. Most people don't, I replied gently. Not until they're the ones standing in the storm. That evening, I returned to Route 58. The sky glowed amber. I stood where I'd once pulled over, listening to distant thunder that no longer felt like a warning, just memory. Briggs had been reassigned, not disgraced, just moved far enough to reflect. Maybe that was mercy too. Weeks later, Admiral Warren slid a folder across his desk. East Coast Humanitarian Logistics Division. This belongs to you, he said, because when the next storm comes, you'll know when to follow the manual and when to follow your heart. Years passed, storms came and went, Project Samaritan grew, trucks rolled out with a new motto painted on their sides, order serves people, or it serves nothing. One afternoon, a letter arrived, from Briggs. You were right, I was wrong. I'm learning now. I felt no bitterness, only closure. On the anniversary of Project Samaritan, Warren stood beside me again at the pier. You turned one moment of decency into doctrine, he said, only because you believed in it. He smiled. Maps mean nothing without someone brave enough to drive the road. Before he left, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a grainy photo from that stormy night, my truck, their SUV, rain cutting through the dark like silver threads. On the back, he'd written, for when the storms return so you remember what courage looks like in the dark. Months later, another hurricane came. I drove again. I always would. An old woman at a shelter took my hand and said, you came when No one else did, and I remembered the voice in the rain, "You've done more than you know." As the sun set behind the hangars that night, I whispered, "Aye, sir, because honor isn't loud. It doesn't demand recognition, it waits quiet, steady until someone chooses what's right. One act of mercy can change an entire chain of command."